Oh, hello. So it's been a couple months since I've been active on this channel. It was a good couple months though. I got married. I went to Hawaii. I got a PlayStation 5. You know, one of those is not as big as the other, but I still think it's worth mentioning. However, as time has gone on, I think I've realized that I need to do videos like this just for myself. I need that creative outlet. I need to do projects that are just for me. So hopefully moving forward in 2022, I'll be much more active on this channel. My goal is to post at least once every other week, or a somewhat regular schedule, and we'll see how that goes. And if you are new, you may not know this, but I used to create independent movies and short films and documentaries, and I would like to get more into that. We'll see how that goes. I think we're still in a very questionable time, just kind of with COVID and all things like that. But if I could get back into that at some point during 2022, I think that's what my goal is. I think that's what I would like to do. But I thought that a good way to kind of get back into the swing of things is to kind of put a cap end on 2021, because 2021 was a good year, I think, especially in the world of movies. It was a return to movies. 2021 was when the movie theaters opened back up and we could kind of get that brief taste of what life was like, before all of the chaos. And it was still up in the air. There was still a question, and it really wasn't until a couple of weeks ago when things really started to feel back to normal, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But I think that's something that's worth being celebrated. I remember for us, the first movie that we saw back in theaters was Mortal Kombat. And while it did get questionable reviews, me and my wife both enjoyed it for what it was. We had a good time with it, and it was a nice return to the movies, and I definitely would not change that. But that is not what we're here to talk about. Today, I'm going to tell you guys my top 5 movies of 2021, the movies that I thought were the best, and that if you haven't seen, that I think are definitely worth checking out. And this is just a disclaimer, but of course, this is my personal list. These are my personal opinions. Your list may include these, or it may be a completely different set of lists, and that's the beauty of film, right? Is that it's all subjective, and that different things appeal to different people, and there's a piece of the cake to go around for everyone, right? So I've gone on long enough. Let's get right into it. Starting at number 5, we have Ghostbusters Afterlife. Now, this was a movie that I literally had no expectations for, and I think that actually worked to the movie's benefit. Now, me not being a very big fan of the Ghostbusters franchise, but being familiar with it, I know the characters, I know the rules of the universe, so it wasn't like I was questioning too much kind of going into it. But this was just a fun movie. This was an enjoyable movie, and it had that little extra to it. It had that heart. It had that spirit. It had that charisma that is always good to see in a blockbuster film like this. You can tell that this was made by a person with passion. You may not know this, but Ghostbusters Afterlife was actually directed by the son of the man who directed the original Ghostbusters. And I think that had a few people cautious, but I think that was actually probably the best choice for someone to direct this film, because it connected to the original franchise and it capped it off in a trilogy-like kind of way while bringing its own kind of flair to it. I really enjoyed the characters, especially the younger kid. I think her name was Phoebe, and just kind of her character and her story arc and where they took her. I definitely loved Paul Rudd. You can't, in my opinion, you can't go wrong with Paul Rudd. There were multiple times in watching this movie that me and my wife looked at each other and were just like, this is really cool. Like, this is a really fun movie. And it was just a good time. And yeah, it was just a nice way to escape into a different universe for a bit. And it was one that when I walked out, I was like, I have to go watch that at least one more time. But anyway, moving on to number 4 on our list, we have SpiderMan No Way Home. And I definitely think that people that know me expected this to be a little bit higher on the list, and I'll explain why. By the way, I will go into spoilers, so if you don't want to know anything about this movie, or if you have not watched it yet, just skip to this time code, and just know that I liked the film and it was great. And now we are doing spoilers in 3, 2, 1. So I had a really great time with this movie, but it did bring up the question of, do I like this movie just because of the nostalgia, right? Do I like this just because Toby and Andrew come back? Or is it a good movie on its own? And I think that the answer is yes to both of those. I think that as a Spider-Man story, as Tom Holland's Spider-Man story, and as the cap to the end of his trilogy, I think this does a very solid job in teaching this version of Peter Parker what responsibility means, what consequences mean, what being Spider-Man means. And this movie does it in a way that rectifies what I, along with a lot of other people, kind of had criticized the MCU Spider-Man films for doing, which is kind of giving Peter everything, right? Like in Spider-Man Homecoming, he gets the Tony Stark suit. It comes with a lot of powers. It kind of does his job for him in a lot of different situations. And so I just really enjoyed that this film kind of pulled that back and was like, what does Peter do when he's on his own, when he has everything taken away from him? Who is Peter Parker? The boy now becoming a man, and what does that mean for him in his life? What does that mean for the people that he loves? One thing that was great about this movie too is it was a sort of cultural event, right? We had 2 years of buildup of speculation. Oh, this picture leaked out. Could this be real? Oh, now there's a video of Andrew Garfield going around. Does this mean he's in the movie, or was this, done in, After Effects? Like, there was so much speculation that going to see this film, it felt like this movie was the end of its own journey. And you don't get that too often. So I definitely had to have this movie on my list just because of the fact that going to watch this on opening night is an experience that I will never forget. It was an amazing time, and I had a great crowd that, cheered every time a character came on screen. And just for that experience alone, it was great. But then also, I feel like this is a solid movie that isn't perfect, but presents the characters and the situation and the story in a way where I'm more than okay with a couple of plot holes. I'm more than okay with the suspension of disbelief, if just to be able to reach that feeling of wonder and that feeling of excitement that this movie gave me. So definitely Spider-Man No Way Home had to make the cut. And now we move on to the top 3. Now, these films were very tough to put in a particular order. I kind of switched them around a couple of times, but I think I found the order that is most true to me at this current point in time. Who knows? It could change, but for right now, this is how I feel. So for number 3, we have the movie Nobody. And it's crazy to think that this movie came out in this year because it feels like a long time ago. But yeah, this movie came out in January. This was the second movie we saw going back to the movies. And I had seen the trailers. I knew this was a movie I would like for the very superficial reasons, right? I'm a big fan of the John Wick film, so this being done by that creative team, and then with the inclusion of Bob Odenkirk, who I'm a huge fan of for Breaking Bad and just kind of, different projects throughout his entire filmography. But although I knew that I would like this movie, I didn't know that I would love this movie. And the movie Nobody just has a certain charm to it, and again, it's kind of the same as the other 2 movies on this list, and I think you'll see kind of a pattern, but there's a certain charisma to this movie that I really liked. The deep dive into the character and how much time they spent in really kind of explaining, like why he is the way that he is and how these certain situations that are happening to him kind of tie in with his life and the way that things are going, and is this what he wanted? Now, with all of the movies on this list, this is probably the one that the least people have seen, because this movie came out in January. Not a lot of people were going to the movies, then people may have not heard about it. So because of that, this may have been one of the ones that you missed, but this is definitely one that you should check out if you enjoy hyper intense action movies mixed in with a lot of comedy and a lot of charm. This is definitely one that you will not regret. It is definitely worth at least one watch. And I strongly recommend this as a date night, kind of stay in, pop the popcorn, pour yourselves a glass of wine, and have a great time with this film. And now moving on to number 2 is a number 2 in its franchise. It is Quiet Place 2. A quick story about this movie. So this film was originally supposed to come out my birthday weekend in 2020. And we were 1 week away. I was just about to get our tickets, and then everything closed down. And so when this movie came out, it had felt like a full circle of things. It had felt like, okay, like we're finally kind of returning back to the way that things were. And this was the first movie I think we saw with like a packed crowd, with a packed house. With these 2 Quiet Place films, I will go and see whatever movie that John Krasinski is directing, because he has such a beautiful way of speaking language through his cinematography, through his storytelling, that this film just captivated me from first frame all the way to the credits. This is a movie that my eyes never left the screen. I was never pulled out of it. I was always just wanting to know what the next thing would be. John Krasinski builds suspense in an incredible way. He builds tension. He builds drama in an amazing way. To me, this is definitely one of those where the sequel outshines the original. I do know that he's kind of questioning if he'll come back for a part 3, but I really wish he would just kind of cap off this trilogy, because I really think this has a potential to be in the conversation for the best trilogies of all time, if they can stick the landing on that third film, if they can get John Krasinski back. These 2 films of A Quiet Place 1 and 2, it's just a beautiful story about family, about sticking together. I think it's very evident the subtext that's in this film and the thematic messages. I think that this is a timeless story that even if you're a person that doesn't like these high suspense, high tension films, I think that this is a movie that everybody can pull something from. I think this is a movie that everybody can get something out of it. And yeah, I mean, this film to me is definitely pretty near of just like a perfect film and a masterpiece of its own, especially when paired with its predecessor. Quiet Place 2 is like a 9.8, like a solid movie. And when this movie came out, I remember walking out of the theater and thinking that's going to be a tough film to top. And we almost made it to the end of the year without it being topped. And then one film came along that blew my mind and blew me away. And so my number 1 pick, the movie that I personally think was the best movie of 2021, it's a musical. It's one that I really hadn't heard much about. I never saw a trailer. I just kind of went in and watched it. My number 1 pick for this year is Dear Evan Hansen. I'm just kidding. No. It's Tick, Tick, Boom. Well, okay, first of all, let me just say that Andrew Garfield is one of those actors that whatever film he's in, I will go and I will watch it. He's just one of those actors that ever since Social Network, I've just tracked his career. However, even with that, I really didn't know much about this movie. I didn't even know it was coming out. I have never seen Rent. And then I heard there were reviews. I heard this movie was getting a lot of buzz. And so that kind of, piqued my interest. And just previously this year, Lin-Manuel Miranda had released another movie called In the Heights. I think he was just a producer on that. But I really enjoyed that film. So when I found out he was directing this paired with Andrew Garfield, I was like, okay, this definitely deserves me just kind of checking it out. One thing about me is that I love movies of someone trying to make their dreams come true. I love movies of man versus themselves, of them kind of having to overcome their biggest obstacle, which is themselves. And a lot of movies have done it, but from what I've seen, none of them have done it like this before. And this was a movie that I could watch, 100 times and never really get tired of it. This is one of those movies that show what life is all about, and I think this is a movie that after I'm done watching it, it makes me want to just kind of shoot for the stars and go for the moon, because we don't know how much time that we have here, and we got to make the most of it. We have to make every day count. I love when a movie can remind me of that. I love when a movie can inspire me to do more with my life. I love when a movie can push me to be the best of myself that I can be. And yeah, and this is definitely just one of those movies. And on top of that, this being Lin-Manuel Miranda's directorial debut, you would never be able to tell. He is incredible with the cinematography of this movie, that paired with the choreography, with the different set pieces that they do. There's one scene that takes place in a diner, and there's a lot of moving parts, both practical and then done in post-production as well, with visual effects. And the end result is this just a culmination of an amazing performance by Andrew Garfield and Vanessa Hudgens and the rest of the cast. And I'm just very glad to have experienced the gift that is Tick, Tick, Boom. But yeah, guys, that was my list of 2021. Tomorrow I'll be uploading my most anticipated movies of 2022. And then if I have time, I will also be doing my most anticipated video games of 2022, because I would love to bring some more gaming content on this channel. So be on the lookout for those. And guys, please let me know in the comments, what were your favorite movies of 2021? Do you have a top 5 list, a top 10 list, a top 3? Let me know down in the comments. I would love to start a conversation with you guys about movies and film, because again, it's all subjective and it's all things that we love, right? So let's just talk about it. Until next time, guys, my name is Teo, and hasta la vista.